Paralives is opening up about the state of their finances, inzoi, and early access plans, plus more information about autonomy and world customization. These statements come from the November dev chats and reveal what I think is a fair bit about how the team is envisioning their development as we head, of course, closer to early access in sometime in 2025. Now, of top concern, of course, is Paralives going to be successful and are they going to be able to sustain themselves? This question I think was very interesting. Is there a plan for once the game releases finance-wise? I am worried that people will stop paying the Patreon because the game will exist. The rewards will be completed and all the DLC are going to be free. I'm also worried that the dev team will end up disbanding. Will the game become self-sustaining in terms of keeping the 13 members together? Alex answered that they have not confirmed the plans concerning what will happen to Patreon after release, but that they are confident that the sales from the game will be good enough to sustain the team for quite a while. I did speak about it when they announced their plan to make all DLC free, and at the time I actually had a controversial opinion and people probably still disagree with me, and that is I was concerned about those plans. Don't get me wrong, there are some games out there that do make money in a variety of ways if the DLC is free or other content is free. I do of course want Paralives to be successful and I hope in the long term they actually are, but my opinion is it is going to be a wait and see to see how sustainable the model is. Now don't get me wrong, I do think Sims and other big games do, so to speak, milk the system in terms of the great extent of DLC you get. On the other hand, an indie team going with absolutely no paid content of course is always a risk. And again, yes, some indie games have done it and been successful, so it's one of those wait and see, but for now they are saying they are confident in their model and it doesn't seem that they are concerned about it, at least in the meantime. Also, let me know what you think in the comments below about what will happen to Patreon after it's released, and do you think people will still continue to donate in large numbers? In addition to finances, the other hard thing that Paralives has always been up against is people comparing the game to other games. And of course, I've done that myself too. But right now, there's still a lot of buzz about inzoi. Of course, inzoi was delayed, but someone mentioned this in terms of Paralives and its early access. Not gonna lie, I'm excited for inzoi, especially now that it has a release date, but I'm also eagerly awaiting Paralives, maybe more so. So with inzoi having an early access release date, do we have any updates from yourselves as to when we can expect to get our hands on Paralives? I do think it's really interesting they brought inzoi into this. I just see them as very different games. No doubt, of course, they are in the same category. I can talk about this at length in another video, but inzoi is just going for a completely different mood, a completely different tone, completely different graphics, and of course the devices that these games are going to be offered on is going to be fairly different, at least as of now. So overall, I think it's interesting to compare this. I do understand people wanting to have a firm deadline for Paralives, but honestly, inzoi already set a deadline for early access and they moved it back once, and we also saw what happened with Life by You. Personally, I think that Alex's answer is fine. Paralives is scheduled to release in 2025 and we don't have updates on a more precise date yet. I would rather them play it actually cautious on this and only announce the date when they're pretty darn sure it's going to happen. And talking about early access, they're actually not planning to have any playtests for Patrons or streamers. They will only be doing private playtests with friends. The reason is they wouldn't want the game to leak if they send it out to too many people. And if they send it only to a few Patrons or streamers, it wouldn't feel fair. Now, honestly, I have tons of mixed opinions about this, but I definitely understand their fear of leaks. After all, leaks happen all the time. Of course, the downside is if you're doing playtests only with friends, I don't think you're getting the best feedback possible. Granted, this is before early access. And of course, early access is a time to get feedback and continue to improve the game. Still, like I said, while I understand their concerns about leaks, there is the downside of just going to friends. I certainly hope that whoever is playtesting it will be able to give them very constructive criticism, and hopefully it will lead well into that early access period. I also wanted to mention that the Paralives team has been very open about how many influences this game has, and I actually really like that. It tells us a lot about their process and what kind of games they admire. They've talked about the Sims franchise franchise quite a bit, but they are also inspired by other games, including the Life is Strange franchise. What's so cool is they have a lot of admiration for different games, and they're still looking to put their own vision on their game. That's something I've always liked about the team. Since we're still somewhat talking about early access, I do have to remind you that no story progression is planned for early access. Now this means that townies getting kids, getting married or breaking up, moving or growing up. However, they do plan to add it in a future update. Now this is something I also have mixed emotions about. I think of course you don't have to have everything in early access right away. After all, it is early access. And the team has made it clear they plan to update the game for some time to come. And of course, story progression is very difficult to get right. We've all seen it way out of balance before. On the other hand, I think since it's such a major system and it impacts so many different aspects of the game, I do think it still would be best to have at least at some point during early access. This is a concern I raised before, but my deepest hope would be that they add at some point during early access, even if it is at the tail end. But what does that mean for autonomy in general? As Anna explains, I think the autonomy of townies will be a little bit different than paras created by the player, because for optimization reasons, we don't want to simulate every little action they do when they're just hidden at their place. There will be a town autonomy system that will bring some of the townies to public places, visited by your household characters, so of course they're going to be crossing paths. Basic autonomy includes taking care of needs and of course doing all sorts of autonomous interactions, personality, emotions, and relationships. And of course there's a lot to unpack here. Personally, I think this is one of the very most challenging things about making a life simulation game. Making your characters feel unique, really working out those interactions, and also having them have autonomy on their own. I know another big hot topic is rabbit holes. As this person asks, when it comes to jobs, are there any entertainment ones like acting or being a recording artist to get the pair's music out there and go on tours? As Anna says, for now, there is no job that will not be a rabbit hole. It will be possible to sell your art or play for tips, but there is no plan to make it a full career gameplay-wise. Now again, this is no surprise if you've been following Paralives for some time. They have said they want to add active careers in the future, but it looks like for early access, it is all going to be rabbit holes. Me personally, I would love to see them add even just a freelance career. I'm not saying it's easy, but it would be a nice addition to kind of balance out all the rabbit holes. I'm not a big active career person, but I do like having those options for other players and just for me occasionally. So I hope in the future they are able to add those, and like I said, I think just adding a freelance career to test out in early access, if they are able to, would be fantastic. This also applies to activities like sports. There's definitely sports related skills, so there could be sport related careers too. However, attending a sports game will not be possible unless it's a rabbit hole, because the animation work to make that would be huge, but watching sports on TV will be a thing. I never expected Paralives to have a full sports team that was functioning. This is not something I would expect in a Sims game either. However, in the future, it would be great to add objects like a soccer goal or even something that's just played between two different paras. As you will remember, we are going to have tools to edit and create worlds in Paralives, which I think is absolutely awesome, and I wish that was a standard for simulation games. I think it gives you so much more to customize your game with. However, as a reminder, this is not going to be in early access. The only reason I express so much concern about something like story progression is because it's a deep system that impacts gameplay. This I could see them adding later on, and I would be fine with it. But speaking of worlds and neighborhoods, one thing I know a lot of players hate in The Sims is townie fashion. Honestly, I think it's kind of funny sometimes, but I understand that the randomly generated townie fashion is really atrocious. And actually, Alex has an answer for this in Paralives. The plan right now is to create a lot of pre-made outfits, and townies will randomly take one of them. This way we avoid that issue. This is really neat, and I really think that The Sims should do something like this too. Another area of contention has been about the para's appearance, and this time I'm talking about the blush. There's been some confusion about this, so I just want to set the record straight because I think I personally have added to this. The good news is you can change the color of blush independently and pick a color that's closer to the skin tone of the parafolk if you want. It can be more subtle, or you could put it totally off. This is great. My only request is maybe have the default a little less harsh. Another excellent part of Paralives is they really think about every little asset they put into this game. And it turns out we haven't seen the last of hairstyles either. They are still working on adding more diversity to their hairstyle collection in response to an answer about more ethnic hairs. And while they acknowledge they cannot cover everything when it comes to cultural items, they're open to feedback, they're doing research before tackling something they don't know, and this includes what Anna says as non-mainstream cultures. Most of them will be coming later in free updates, in accordance to community feedback. And honestly, I am hopeful they will strike a good balance because this last answer really shows how they set limitations that make sense for their game. This person, for example, wanted time period gameplay, such as 70s and 80s and 90s. However, they firmly stated, this is something we've been asked a few times, but we are not planning to have technology and clothes be divided into decades or time periods. We don't really plan to have era-specific wear, items, or technology in general, as our focus will be more of a contemporary town, so we won't have that functionality right out of the box. This might be something a modder could do, but it won't be present in the game as is. I think this is a fine answer. I think they need to focus on core game and making it a good and enjoyable experience. Let me know what you think, and as always, please take care, and I'll see you in the next one.